Hello and welcome to another segment of Western Wisconsin Journal. I'm Jamie Johnson, the legal and government correspondent. And today, you'll probably notice we're not in studio. We are in downtown Hudson at the Hudson Public Library. And our guest, returning, is our mayor, Rich O'Connor. Rich, welcome back to the show.
Yeah, thank you, Jamie. It's always a pleasure to be here.
Yes, well, you made a cameo here a couple months ago when we did the Booyah in the fall. That's becoming a great annual event.
Yeah, we had a great event. The inaugural was a year ago. We had 500 to 600 people there for a great community event, a great kickoff event. And this year we had over 1,000 attendees. It was great.
Wow, at that rate, we'll have 8,000 in 3 years.
Yeah.
But no, we're here today to talk about, the city, and let's start because we are here in the lobby of our library. There's a history, of course, that brings us to this location. The library used to be housed in the same building where we usually record these interviews, and the studio being in the basement, and the library was upstairs when I started doing these 18 years ago. But tell us a little bit. You have a history because you were appointed to the library board by the previous mayor.
Yes.
And so tell us a little bit about what you've seen in the time you've been associated with library board and appointing people or being on the board yourself.
Mayor Al Burchell appointed me to the board in, I believe it was 2012. And we had recently moved into this building. We moved in here in 2010. And so I've seen a lot. I mean, we've had some serious financial issues since we first moved in here. We were part of a joint library that included North Hudson, the town of Hudson, St. Joe, and the city.
And each of those had representatives on the board.
Yes, they each appointed their own representatives, and it was proportionate. So, but we moved in here in, like I said, 2010. The joint library, the joint agreement actually took place in 2002, 2003. Once we moved into this building, we pretty much immediately started having financial issues, and we had hit. It was coming out of a bad economic time, the 08, 09 recession, and the cities, the municipalities had not recovered substantially from that, and all of us were at levy limits, and it was difficult to try to continue to finance the library the way it needed to be, and more importantly, the way it had to be according to law. And in fact, the law was changed. Representative Knutson helped us with that in order to get us out from underneath what we thought at that time was a very burdensome law as far as funding here and what was required. Since then, and most recently in the past year, the joint library agreement has been dissolved, and now the funding for the library essentially is solely through the city. And so there's now a city library as opposed to a joint library. But having said that, it's not just for city residents, it's a community library like it always was. And so it's available still to everybody in the surrounding areas, all the municipalities that were partners in the past, as well as those that are beyond them, too.
So residents of Hudson Township, which I am, but St. Joe and Troy, they can still come borrow books and so forth.
Not only can they come, we welcome them. We want them here. They've been a great part of a great asset to the success of this library, and we want them to continue to feel very welcome here.
And then as they check out books, there's a much more complicated reimbursement that ends up happening with the tax dollars.
Right, but nothing that they're going to see that the patrons will see as they're checking the books out. But there is a formula for it's called the cost of circulation, and then we get reimbursed for some of that through the county.
Now, this building that we're sitting in also houses the police. So how is that working out? Because I know originally the thought was that the sole occupant of this building would be the library.
Right.
But you mentioned those money problems happened about the same time that you had space problems at City Hall, and the police department needed to go somewhere. So, they've been sharing this building, but how much longer is that going to be?
Well, not for very much longer. Now that the city is taking over funding exclusively for the library, we intend to be moving the library into the entire building, which was the original concept back in 2010 when the city first purchased this building and moved the library over here. Because of excess space that we had, the city decided that it would be a great accommodation for the police department at the time, but with the intention that the police would be moving out within 5 years. Well, we're 13 years later, that hasn't happened. But I can say that the city has an opportunity to purchase some property that would allow us to move the police department into a different venue. And in fact, we had discussed this at City Council. It's been in the plan now for some time. When I say we have an opportunity to buy a piece of land, we originally were thinking the police department would go up on the same site as the fire department.
Yeah, that's the last I heard. So.
Right, and but I mean, it was going to be cramped, and there were still going to be some space issues up there. But this now opportunity that we have is actually going to provide us with maybe some cost savings on that. And I would say that if everything works out well, the police department will probably be moving out of here by the end of 2024 or sometime early in 2025, which frees up the building for the library. And as you pointed out, the original intent of the purchase of this building was to have the library take the entire space.
Okay. So sometime in the next 12 to 18 months, the police department will be moving to a new location. Is that public information where that location is yet?
No, it's not. And I wish I could tell you, and I hope I don't slip here in the conversations.
All right. Well, we'll try to avoid that. But nonetheless, would the police department still be maintaining some type of downtown presence if the actual headquarters moved?
Well, it's not like we would have a satellite place for them. Everything would be headquartered at that new site. But I mean, we will have constant police presence throughout the city anyway, like we always have had.
Sure. It's and when it comes to the police, law enforcement is one of the high priorities of residents. They want public safety. So, and we've had issues there as well monetarily. How are we doing in that respect with regard to having all the openings filled with, police officers and patrolling all shifts?
We've been fortunate in that respect. As far as I know to date, all of our positions are filled, and all of our shifts are being filled, and that's working out great. Obviously we are a growing community, and I know that the police department in the next budget or two is going to be coming in asking for some more positions, and we'll have to weigh that against obviously other considerations, right? So.
And as we get into this budget discussion, mentioned how the library is solely funded by the city. Now, is there some mechanism that the state allowed that would get you so that you are not hitting your levy limit and having to take away from other departments like public safety or public works?
No, there's no mechanism for that. And it's an unfortunate formula that the state has for funding libraries, not just here, but throughout the state. You're punished if you become efficient. We became very efficient here in this library because of the funding issues that we had. When you're efficient, you reduce the overall cost of circulation. When you reduce the cost of circulation, it means that you don't get the reimbursement that you were getting with higher costs of circulation. So the money coming from the county is actually less than it would have been with a less efficient way of operation. So I'm not happy with that formula. I know that there have been a number of communities throughout the state that have tried to change it, that have voiced their concerns about it, but to date, the legislature has done nothing to resolve that. In fact, it can be quite punitive, and there is a formula, again, that the state has to hit an exempt amount that you have to tax to, and once you tax to that exempt amount, it means then that the next level of mechanism does not trigger, which would be the county coming in and taxing our residents to that exempt amount. So either way, our residents are going to be paying exactly what the state wants us to pay. Now, having said that, When the other three communities that were part of the joint venture with us, the joint library, when they exited, they had capacity, levy capacity that they were using for the library. All right, that's not, library funding is not exempt from your levy limit. It's included in the levy limit.
Okay.
And it's an unfunded mandate that comes from the state. Again, something I'm not too happy about. But when they exited, and in fact, it will be actually at the end of this year that they officially exit, their levy capacity is being unused, but they cannot, their total levy capacity would be reduced by the amount of money that they were levying for the library.
Okay.
All right? And according to the Department of Revenue, they have been able to transfer that levy capacity to us, which is good and bad.
So that's the mechanism I was kind of alluding to.
Okay.
Is there's the transfer of the levy limit. And for folks that want to know more about the library and its impact and what it's doing here, because it's much more than just checking out books, obviously, they can reference our prior interview with Shelley Tugas, who is the director here at the library, and she does an awesome job. Getting back then to talking about the city, and one way to grow the budget is to grow the city.
Development.
And development, whether it's commercial, which is more higher dollar value property and can generate more tax dollars than residential. Where do we stand with where development? What can you give us as an update to our viewers?
Well, there are a couple things going on right now. People, I'm sure, are well aware that when the Hudson House was torn down, it became a vacant lot that was, well, we can say it now, it's going to be a Festival Foods. And they've started to prepare the land for that, but they're going to get underway really in earnest in the spring. And so sometime in probably 2025, we will have a Festival Foods open there. So that's some development, and that's an old lot in the city that people have been very curious about. It
looks much bigger with the buildings gone there.
Doesn't it? Yeah. And then you've seen where Hudson Physicians, they opened up their building this past year, and it's a great facility, a great asset to our community. But they had, the way they explained this to me, they had filled out their space and had excess people wanting to come in. So they are right now in the planning phase of adding an additional building over in that same site.
Wow. It's just hard to believe that they were in with the Hudson Hospital and doing all their business. Then they expanded this huge building over there on Carmichael, and now they need more room yet. But that is actually city. So the city annexed that area, and that's why we have an intersection with a stoplight there.
That's right. Yeah. So the city annexed that property a couple of years ago. At the request of Hudson Physicians, which became the property owners over there. We now own, or not own, we now have within the city limits the two properties on the east side of Carmichael, the first being Hudson Physicians, but also Faith Community Church was annexed a few years ago so that they get access to our sewer and water. I'm sure, as you know, the entire eastern side of Carmichael from the freeway up to, well, let's just say up to Vine, is targeted for annexation. In fact, it's in our comprehensive plan, has been for some time, that would be annexed and would be part of the city for development at some point. I think it's important to note that the city doesn't just go out and look for properties to annex. Property owners need to come to us for annexation.
Okay. And we all know that Hudson Township has a lot of 2.5 acre lots. There is one development over there by the middle school where they're less than that. They're 1 acre or smaller. Do you see the city, because they have rights to object or to allow developments of, within 3 miles, is it, or 2 miles of
3
the
miles,
city? 3 miles of the city. And so is that something that we're going to perhaps see a little bit more, I don't want to use the word aggressive, but more enforcement of that policy in order to have future growth, try to get some smaller lots on the east. Because you can only go east, you can't go west or north. So.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's potentially, yes, that would be the case. So you're talking about extraterritorial rights. Our extraterritorial rights were increased when we became a city of the third class. We had been a city of the fourth class, and these are generally dictated by population size. And so when we had the requisite, actually we sat on this for quite a few years,
Right.
probably a decade easily.
And that's what I was alluding to. It really wasn't done in the past.
No, and for whatever reason, the city had made the decision that they weren't going to declare themselves a city of the third class, but we did that most recently. And so, and with that means added extraterritorial zone, extraterritorial rights. That means that we have a say in development in territory that might at some point in time be annexed. So, and there are some examples right now. I can't think of any for this interview, but there are some examples of where we probably would not have allowed development, knowing that we were with properties that were within our comprehensive plan for
Sure.
planned annexation that now have development that kind of limited what we were available.
Well, I
to do.
remember Mayor Burchill, before you became mayor, was already talking about how the city was running out of, available land for
Right.
developers or residential.
Yeah.
So, when you run out of land, you have to find more, but it's not something like the city is going to condemn or anything like that. It's got to come from the property owners to request annexation.
That's right. Yeah.
So with that, what would be within the 5-year plan, whether it's public works, and financing that? I mean, these are some big dollar items that can't be just paid for in a single annual budget.
That's right. So a couple things have happened in just the last few months that are going to accelerate some of the projects that we had planned for a little bit farther down the line. We had a 5-year plan. We were going to do the police department first, as I said, over by the fire station, and that was going to happen, be developed and built in probably the next 2 years. And then we were also going to be doing the public works building. We currently have 3 different facilities that are distant from each other and just kind of cobbled together to be able to house our equipment and our staff. And we've been, for some time now, talking about, for many administrations have been talking about trying to find a singular facility for public works, and we could unite all of those different facilities into one for our equipment, for our staff. So that was planned within the next 5 years, and we had been planning to bond for that. And all of a sudden, just recently, a couple opportunities popped up where we could perhaps acquire land, but we had to act on them, and that's happening right now. But we had to act on that quickly. So that will accelerate the process and by a few years. So we might be seeing both those projects happening at the same time. The bad news is we would have to bond for them currently with higher interest rates. And that's a conversation, in fact, that I'm going to be having in just a little while later today about how we're going to do that. But the good news is that when we bond for these things, we are able to renegotiate those bonds.
Right.
And we have done that continuously in the 7 years that I've been in office, and we have been able to refinance at lower rates and get the debt off the books at a reasonable rate. We've saved a lot of money that way. So even though we would be borrowing today at a higher rate, we would be able to refinance as we see interest rates going down, and we're anticipating that they will.
Well, and with your day job being in finance, you can understand all of that and get that message across to the council members and so forth.
Right.
So we've seen in the last, maybe now it's been 6-7 years, but Vine Street was closed for a while, and 2nd Street was worked on. Do we have any big projects like that in the works for 2024?
Well, we do have our CIP, capital improvement projects, already planned out, and so we do have a number of projects. Forgive me for this, but I can't remember exactly where, but we have them, for like next year, for 2024, but we have them planned out for street repair and different things like that. And we do have a very good plan right now. Of course, things always pop up that interfere with the plan, but we've been very good at being nimble, and I expect that we will continue to do that. But just suffice to say, the folks here in town are going to see different types of street repair, street work being done throughout the city.
And then last, one of the things we've touched upon in your last couple of interviews is with the state of Wisconsin DOT and Exit 2.
Right.
You know, there's a lot of investment that needs to go in there, and I'm not sure what the catalyst needs to be in order to get that expanded, but they've just been saying there's nothing in the next biennium that is expected to be done there. That was 2 bienniums ago they've been saying that. So.
Yeah, they have made it clear to us. When I first came in office, we were under the impression that the DOT was going to redo that interchange starting around 2025. Since then, in fact, they came out with a nice little dog and pony show with the designs and everything, invited the community in for public hearings and to show us what they had on the drawing board. Since then, they've decided that they're not going to do anything on that intersection until at least 2040.
Wow.
Which puts the property owners in a pretty bad bind. And so they right now are considering development over there, which they're bringing the plans to us pretty much as we speak. When Hudson Physicians decided to move over to the east side of Carmichael out of the hospital, in conversations with us, the Community Development Department here in the city, Mike Johnson specifically, we had talked about what we thought would be a great idea to have that as the beginning of a nice health campus here. We've got the hospital just across the freeway, and then Hudson Physicians, and there's more property to expand. And I don't know if I mentioned this earlier in the interview or not, but they are planning to expand and add another building, and with significant square footage in that building. We would like to see continued expansion for a healthcare campus in that area, and the property owners are looking at that right now too. In addition, they are also they're proposing that we put a Cub Foods in there. So now we went from having one grocery store to now we seem to have some grocery wars going on, which is a good thing for the residents here to try to keep prices down and have some different options. Not a good thing for the grocers that are currently here.
But they will certainly. It also brings in folks from into the townships and brings them into the shop here as well.
Well, when you have something like that here, they're not going across the border to shop.
So would development of east of Carmichael, if it started at the interstate, went all the way up to UU, is that something that would change the timeline perhaps for the interchange at Exit 2?
Potentially, and they have said that. And this is a rather sad commentary. And I'm going to tell you this: it's not a great thing to be quoting, but this is exactly what was said by the Department of Transportation on several occasions, not just once. That somebody actually has to die at that interchange before they're going to look at moving up the date in which they might work on that interchange.
Okay.
But
it is sad.
It is, but when you figure that it's going to put more pressure on Carmichael, it's the development that is along our Carmichael. It's going to put more pressure on Carmichael, more pressure on the interchange, and that means more traffic.
Okay. Well, anything else that you want to update our viewers on and what's going on with Hudson and what we might see in 2024?
Wow. Just the development along Carmichael. Know that streets are going to be repaired. We do have a plan and how that's going to be done. It's going to happen over the next several years. It's an ongoing process. It's not like, oh yeah, we'll get it all done. And once things are done, obviously you go back and start repairing the things that have been done 10 years ago. One thing that we didn't talk about really was the development down here along the riverfront, where we had
I've been seeing a lot of activity with the equipment over there by the old bridge.
Well, the boat launch was up and running this summer. It was great. Great addition. It was used. That parking lot was really full most of the summer.
It's a great
And
expansion of that parking lot.
yeah, not just that, but the elevation of the launch itself to be able to accommodate flooding. Although we didn't see that last summer.
Right, right.
But it's in anticipation and really in response to the flooding that we had 3 years in a row where that launch was closed more than 50% of the time.
So what are the most recent changes that
So
folks
what's
are gonna
happening
see?
down here, and we've talked about this in the past, is our boardwalk. The Department of the DNR, Natural Resources, doesn't like the term boardwalk. They call it a wharf. So we'll call it a wharf for these purposes. But
Okay.
it's 650 feet of dock essentially, and it's 8 feet wide, which is going to allow people to be able to walk.
So that's 2 football fields, huh? 650 feet.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
And so it's floating. It's not like when you walk up along the wall, you're walking above the water. You're actually going to be on the water, the feel of the water. People like to walk on docks, and boardwalks where you have on some undeveloped areas where you go through nature with a nice boardwalk. So, but this would also be a tie-along for boats coming in, get them out of the bay, get them from the river, and come in and take advantage of the amenities that we have here in town. It's going to be great for our businesses. It's going to be great for our citizens, residents here in town. A great addition to Lakefront Park, and we're really excited to see this thing finally coming to fruition. The first conversations about this were with the DNR back in 2016, the fall of 2016, the first few months that I was in office.
Great. Well, I think that's a great spot for us to conclude our interview, and we'll look forward to seeing that wharf as it gets constructed.
Yeah.
And we can have another interview about what's coming up next in the City of Hudson.
That'd be great.
Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. It's always good to be here.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it.
And I want to thank our viewers for watching another segment of Western Wisconsin Journal. I'm Jamie Johnson. Keep watching.